Another thing you might want to, I'm giving you plenty of ideas, you can always go over this later. Better too much than too little.
For sure.
But there was a gas station we stopped at one point, and they had all these campaign sort of advertisements around explaining the future of Iceland's energy goals.
Oh,
how do they want to deal with climate change, for example? Which would shrink a lot of their
killing
relations.
whales because they're so huge and must use a lot of resources.
Actually, people do argue the whales are eating too many of our fish. That's why we kill them. Again, Beatka's boyfriend actually has worked in this area, and he says the amount of fish the whales eat is well, some do eat fish. The toothed whales do, but it's so little. It's pretty negligible. That's kind of a silly argument. But anyway, the energy stuff. They had all these colorful photos. It must have been very expensive to print large, and it said Iceland. I believe it said Iceland will be 100% hydrogen fuel by 2050. Now, if you were to actually seriously look into that claim, my understanding is that that's impossible. Or if that it is possible, not only is it extremely expensive, but that you're not actually decreasing net CO2 emissions, because to create hydrogen fuel, you have to burn more fuel to create that green fuel. So
that's interesting. I wonder.
The whole premise is skewed.
Yeah. Is that for cars or is that for?
It's for cars.
Okay.
And maybe more, but it's always been dubbed as sort of the extremely sexy green alternative that people really go for. They love that idea. That's why Schwarzenegger has a hydrogen fuel Hummer, right? It's a good press. It's good publicity. It's really sexy, and it's a terrible idea. Just scientifically speaking.
I hear you.
So I would be interested again to see if you were to follow up on that. Where are they in terms of their fuel goals?
For sure.
Has anyone spoken against it? Are they starting to realize that the idea is maybe not a good one?
They got till 2050, so.
Well, and if anyone's going to go carbon neutral, Iceland is absolutely prepared. Because, as you've probably heard, the geothermal energy there, they use a lot. The hydropower, they use quite a bit. So they are mostly green anyway. And how lucky.
Especially since there's so few people, too. It's not like it's a really big issue to get enough energy.
So it's sort of like if you think of someone who's inherited a lot of wealth from their folks. They didn't necessarily deserve it, but they're in a position that puts them in a better position than most people. Iceland's sort of the same way in terms of the climate issues. It didn't really do anything to deserve this free energy, but it just happens to be positioned in such a place where they're just way ahead of other countries.
And if they can, harness that potential, give them that. I wonder if they're doing anything for that. There's also, I was reading it, that Iceland was going to be drug-free in 2002. So I thought that was really humorous.
Lofty goals.
Right, that was 10 years ago, I guess.
All right, again, and tell me if I'm following this. Another thing to follow up on is the immigrant issue in Iceland. And this is something that the Grapevine writes some good stuff about as well. They were pretty honest in the article I read. There was this guy, I think he was from the Middle East somewhere, and he wasn't getting the job opportunities he needed, or he was maybe he was being discriminated against, I don't recall. But he had moved to Iceland, he had immigrated there, and was not getting, people weren't listening to him, or he perceived that. So I believe that he threatened to set himself on fire to gain attention. And that sort of opened a national conversation on immigration and prejudice, and how Icelanders are very polite and welcoming. At the same time, because of their remoteness, they are afforded sort of a lag time compared to other countries in prejudice. They don't have to confront it as often as we do when we share the Mexican border. Right? There's so few immigrants. But I think that there is quite a lot of racism there, and maybe it's not talked about very much. So if you can get under the skin of an Icelander, get them to talk about it,
Yeah.
all the better for you, because I've heard that it's difficult to become intimate with an Icelander, to really become good friends.